Hi there. My name is Psyche, and today I have some explaining to do. Last November, I published my first impressions review of Duet Night Abyss after playing it for a week. Needless to say, a lot of people were against my critiques. Being the first former gacha game to remove its character gacha and stamina systems, it enjoyed overwhelming public support for its bold decision to remove such predatory practices, and earned itself tons of goodwill and support. However, I believe if we take a look at the state of the game today, it's time to face the music. While the game can be considered a success at launch, 2 months later, I believe the reception of the game has shifted a little. Of course, not many could have predicted this turn of events, and after my first review, I looked back on the game and asked myself, maybe I did miss some nuances and details here and there. So today, I wish to tackle the topic of reviewing DNA just maybe from a slightly different angle. So where do we begin? Well, to start, a lot of people from YouTube and adjacent communities pointed out something very important regarding DNA. What about Warframe? Did you not know that a lot of elements from DNA were inspired by Warframe? Well, as it turns out, I've actually never played Warframe prior to that review. I didn't really understand to what extent it borrowed mechanics from Warframe, because if only small portions of elements were taken here and there, then I didn't see why it was necessary to mention it. It's kind of like if I said, oh, this game is exactly like Slay the Spire. Except if you never played Slay the Spire, you have no clue what that means. Did DNA have similarities to Warframe's gameplay systems? Did it share similar elements of progression? Or was it a one-to-one copy? Well, let's see. Over the past couple months, I've been on a bit of a pilgrimage, you could say. Over the course of the November and the holiday seasons, I have logged over 150 hours into Warframe, reaching far into the storyline past the New War and are just beginning to explore content past the Steel Path. You might be thinking, wow, so you must know a lot about the game. Well, I can tell you that the Warframe players watching this have the slyest smirks on their faces right now. Thinking that you have a grasp of Warframe in 100 to 200 hours is, frankly, laughable. If you take a look at the Steam reviews for Warframe, the majority of the thorough ones will have hundreds, if not hours, in the quadruple digits. Even today, the game sits at a 91% positive rating and an incredibly active player base, which, by the way, marks Warframe as one of the most successful free-to-play games of all time. Due to the game having been released in 2013, being live for more than a decade, and how new content is rolled out to new players periodically as they play, this just happens to be the unique position that the game sits at. As such, I must preface that this video is not a review of Warframe, but rather, I needed to spend that much time in order to get a gauge of why it's so good, and why Duet Night Abyss decided to take some of its systems. While some of the points I talk about may seem a little far-fetched from the topic of Duet Night Abyss and gacha gaming, I promise you, you will see the connections. This revisit to DNA will primarily be my updated thoughts on the game now that I've experienced where the entirety of its gameplay model was taken from. By the end of this video, I'll be summarizing exactly which components DNA took from Warframe, how that has positively or negatively affected the game, portions I realized I was either right or wrong during my first review, and ultimately what the fate of DNA means for the future of gacha gaming. Let's start with player movement. You'll need a long time to understand the genius of Warframe, but one of the few that doesn't need any introduction is the movement, so let's start there. You command fearsome warriors composed of an impenetrable exoskeleton called Warframes. To put it simply, Warframe's movement and gunplay feel excellent. It's the culmination of over a decade's worth of work refined to perfection. It's responsive, agile, and incredibly satisfying. How there's sparks scraping against the metallic floor when you slide, how there's a quick swishing sound when you flip in mid-air, or how you do an impactful landing when falling from a great height. It really sells the fantasy that you're an unstoppable killing machine. A bulky mesh of armored titanium, but can be as nimble as a mantis. You may equip a primary, a secondary, and a melee weapon. Every weapon has the added detail to sell its impact and destructive power. You literally slice your foes in two with some swords, and arrows shot from your bow are so powerful, you can pierce multiple enemies and pin their bodies on the wall. There is a great variety of weapons in the game, from plain old rifles, to flamethrowers, to dual-wielding pistols, to glaives that you can throw even when it's classified as a melee weapon. One of Warframe's trademark movement maneuvers is the bullet jump. By performing a slide, then pressing the jump button, your Warframe will leap towards the direction that your cursor is facing with increased speed. This can be used to propel yourself forward very quickly, or used to reach high platforms that would have been impossible with regular jumps. Notice the very specific conditions of the bullet jump. It must be preceded by a slide, it's dependent on the direction you're facing, and your avatar will do a horizontal flip when it's being performed. That sounds a little familiar, doesn't it? Indeed, the Helix leap in Duet Night Abyss is, well, clearly inspired by the bullet jump. However, there's a reason why the bullet jump just feels more impactful. See, there's a stat in the game called parkour velocity, and some other Warframes will boost allies' speed, so when you're under the effects of these buffs, bullet jumping now carries a tremendous amount of momentum, allowing you to reach comically fast speeds as opposed to just sprinting. You feel the added utility of traversing this quickly through terrain, whereas in DNA, it just feels like an alternate version of a jump, barely moving you any faster than dashing forward. Any jumps and hits feel floaty, unresponsive, lacking in impact. I should mention that there are a few ways to increase your leap speed, except those changes are barely noticeable when you equip them. In Warframe, when aiming down sight in mid-air, you can also enter Aim Glide, where time seems to slow down and you will fall at a reduced velocity while keeping your momentum. You feel like Superman, raining down a stream of bullets on the enemy below, like firing a round of a strafing gun from a fighter jet. It's incredibly satisfying to pull off, and you can even use it as another movement maneuver to cover long distances. There is a point of drop-off where you start falling at regular speeds if you aim glide for too long though. You can kinda do the same in DNA where you just fall down slower, except there's no way to aim down sight, so you sometimes just hover in mid-air, wasting some ammo before actually hitting something. Just like the Helix leap, it lacks the impact and precision that its source material has. When I returned to Duet Night Abyss, I instinctively tried doing the same maneuvers and felt the movement was just off. Your characters float unnaturally if you try to do the aim glide while reloading your gun, how headshots don't feel nearly as satisfying to land, and the overall stiffness of the controls. I mean, instead of putting all these grapple hook points, why not just make the Helix leap not feel like a wet fart, so the player can grapple anywhere they want? I can confidently say that despite reusing its extremely specific maneuvers, the movement and gunplay feel vastly superior in Warframe. You simply have to download the game, play for 15 minutes, and you will immediately notice. Now we move on to the mission types. The core gameplay loop for these games are extremely similar, if not identical. Please understand that for now, I will simply be comparing the two games mechanically, and will be saving the analysis for a bit later. You run commissions with different objectives, and these will either give you material drops to make upgrades to your roster, or reward you with something at the end. Both games don't have stamina, so you can grind as much as you like. Why don't we take a look at the mission type designs to see if DNA was just inspired by this gameplay loop, or if there are any eerily striking similarities? Exterminate. Go into the map, kill a specified amount of enemies, get to extraction. This is called Terminate in DNA, with the exact same requirements. There is also Expulsion that doesn't need you to go to Extract. This one's pretty vanilla, so I don't think it's all that noteworthy. Capture. There's a high-ranking enemy you need to bring back to base for interrogation. Its location is marked for you, so you have to get to them, defeat them, go up to them, and press X to start an animation where your Warframe will extend one of their arms towards the target while remaining stationary. After that, you get to extraction and leave. If you take too long, then the target gets away and the mission is a failure. In DNA, the mission name and the objectives are the same. Even the capture animation looks similar. Rescue. You have to save a person out to extraction. When entering the prison holding zone, there are wardens that can sound an alarm to execute the hostages. You must remain undetected or find the right holding cell in time. Then go to extraction with the hostage alive. This is called escort in DNA, and as you guessed it, it's exactly the same. Hijack. The enemy has a vehicle full of supplies and you have to escort it to extraction. The twist here is that you must guard the vehicle before it runs out of health, and it can only move forward by draining a player's shield when one is nearby. It will start moving backwards when no one has shield left for it to spend, or when no players are around. The equivalent for this is called relocation in DNA, and it works basically the same way. I should mention that this mission type is one of many where you'll really start to feel how the large roster of Warframe makes the co-op experience more fun. There are numerous frames in the game that can indirectly give you a boost when running this mission. Herald's Skill 1 allows him to immobilize enemies, and every enemy ensnared allows him to gain Overshield, an ability that lets you go past your usual shield limit. Hildren's Pillage ability lets her steal the shields of nearby enemies. Styanax can taunt enemies while generating shield to everyone, as well as granting the squad more shield whenever they kill an enemy. Nidus doesn't have any shield at all, but the game gives a special exception by draining this frame's health instead, which actually is an advantage since enemies drop health orbs very often. These are some direct ways you can gain an advantage in this specific objective, but not giving you a win outright. There are some endless missions where players can choose to either continue the mission with harder objectives or extract with the existing rewards. Let's take a look at those. Defense. Guard an object of interest against enemy waves. Every 3 waves, a prompt will appear, and players will choose whether they wish to continue or extract, with more rewards and harder waves that await. Once the second round has started, the battle arena will often change a little to shake things up, like this one where it moves the defense object along a gondola to another location, or this one where the platform crumbles and everyone will descend to a lower level where the scenery and environment change. Would it be that big of a surprise if I said this exact gimmick happens in DNA as well? Survival. There's an operator that's infiltrating the enemy base, and you have to buy them as much time as you can. There's a life support meter that's basically your health for this mode. Defeating enemies can sometimes give you a little, but there are modules that will appear on the map where you can replenish a lot at once. But the further you go, the more scarce these get. Rewards are given out at 5-minute intervals, and the extraction is available after the first 5 minutes. In DNA, this is called exploration, and while it seems a bit different, its mechanics are pretty similar. Instead of a health bar counting down, you have to collect enough serum to unlock extraction. Defeating enemies can sometimes gain a little bit, but collecting from these modules will grant a lot at once. Excavation. There are relics in the area that these excavators can dig up. Go to the indicated spot, and the excavator will take a few minutes to do its job. You must keep it healthy and supply it with fuel cells. You can get fuel cells by killing nearby enemies that carry them, then bring them to the extractor. Extraction will be available after a few successful relic finds, but you can keep going. Can you take a wild guess how the same mission in DNA works? A few of DNA's mission types can feel similar to some of Warframe's, but with some simplified versions. Alchemy. There's a giant potion vat where you have to throw these vials of 2 elements dropped from enemies towards it. Once you throw enough of the 2, the mission is completed. There are more than just the 2 indicated elements that enemies can drop, so you have to find the right ones among all the corpses. Even if you pick one that's not the indicated element, you can still use it as a bomb by throwing it at other enemies. The closest resemblance in DNA will be Hedge, where you have to fill a brewing vat with serum and all you have to do is kill enemies while within the radius. Sabotage. The enemy has equipment working that you prefer if it wasn't. There are multiple variants of this mission, but the most common one is finding the central structure you're supposed to destroy, remove the coolant cell, then either reinsert the cell into the structure to render it inoperable, where you have to defend these 4 vats for a certain amount of time before the mission is done. Alternatively, insert the fuel cell to overload the structure. You will shoot at these weak points to destroy the structure, but then you will have a time limit to get to extraction, as the entire place will be exploding. The closest resemblance in DNA will be Dismantle, where you simply have to destroy 3 structures on this small map with a time limit. This brings us to the only mission type in DNA that I can make a good argument that's new, which will be Mediation. You have to destroy a central silo structure, but defeating the 3 marked enemies will give you small boosts. You can argue that this is just a variant of Dismantle, and the Hive Sabotage mission from Warframe is sorta similar, as you have to destroy hives, and they can only be damaged when you kill the tumors protecting it. Destroying a hive will also give you a debuff, as well as increasing enemy spawns. That does it for all the missions in DNA, but there's still way more in Warframe. Some of them are in different modes, like the Railjack, where you commandeer a giant ship, and some of them are Archwing missions, where you'll fly around killing enemies or traversing through a crumbling structure. There are a few I would still like to mention, though. Interception. There are 4 beacons on the map. Your goal is to take control of as many as you can by standing in the zone while the enemy isn't, and have the meter fill up. More towers in control means a faster fill rate. The enemy can take it back when they interface with one of the consoles, so you'll have to watch all 4 at once. This is an endless mission type, so the whole squad can vote if they want to continue. Disruption. You have to open 4 locks, and their respective keys are randomly dropped by enemies. When you insert one, though, an elite enemy will spawn and try to make its way to the module. You'll have to defeat it before the enemy reaches the conduit for that key insertion to count as a win. One of the conduits will provide the team a buff while the other 3 grant debuffs. This is also an endless mission type. These two specifically are sort of bundled into DNA's weekly chase commission, where two of the steps are very similar to what you're doing here. One mission I do want to cover as well is Spy, where you have to retrieve data from 3 points on the map, and when you're near the data, there will be drones, lasers, and sensors. If something detects you, then you have a limited amount of time before the data is purged. You have to extract at least one of the data for the mission to count as a win. This mission type is not in Duet Night Abyss, and I suspect the reason why is that DNA didn't figure out a good enough stealth system. See, stealth is a little wonky, but it actually works in Warframe. There are silenced weapons like bows, mods that decrease the chance of enemies hearing you, and abilities that let you go undetected. There's a stealth takedown mechanic, and defeating an enemy while stealth gives you bonus affinity, which is XP for your character and weapons. Just like Hijack, I really like this mission type as it allows some warframes to shine in this mode. The Wukong frame allows you to turn into a gust of wind, letting you fly around in ethereal form, so you can just bypass the traps and lasers. The Noko frame lets you transform into a tiny mushroom where you can just walk past drones and lasers as they won't pick up on your signal. The Loki frame turns you invisible, so you won't have to worry about the drones. It's examples like this where I started to appreciate the system Warframe has. We have different solutions to indirectly give advantages in a specific mission type, adding that extra layer of complexity to its roster. As you can see, despite using the same core gameplay structure, all of DNA's missions are either taken directly from Warframe with little to no changes, and even the ones that were changed do not feel substantial. Once I started to notice this, I couldn't help but think that what this game's doing isn't really all that creative at all. A lot of the existing complexities in Warframe's level designs also felt watered down. Generally, there's a lot of high platforms and vertical height to make movement an equal part of the core gameplay experience, and in DNA, it felt like the maps had too much open space to let the player do any cool maneuvers. The core gameplay is not the only thing that DNA took, so let's go through the rest. Let's also take a look at the open world design for these two games. It's an important distinction that neither Warframe and DNA are classified as full open world games. They are ARPGs with open world elements, and that's as far as it goes. In Warframe, there are 4 open world zones: the Plains of Eidolon on Earth, Orb Valis on Venus, the Cambion Drift on Deimos, and the otherworldly Duviri within the Void, all with their distinct designs and environments. While there are activities you can do, like fishing and mining ores, the central gameplay doesn't take place in these worlds, unless you're specifically farming for something there. You can complete bounties in these areas for different rewards and building reputation with its residents. But the central gameplay loop is the commission-based grind. In the hub area, you'll be in an open lobby where you can see other players, and when you venture out into the wild, that's when you either enter single-player or a 4-player lobby, and the open co-op session terminates. You can probably take a guess that this idea of having an open co-op zone was borrowed for the Plaza and Ice Lake. Now, Warframe contains many MMO elements, with the co-op experience being one of them. You can form lobbies of up to 4 players, and there are numerous Warframes with support abilities. Not to mention, you get an affinity bonus when others are nearby, so you can actually level your gear faster when you play with other players. Most levels will be open lobbies, so co-op play is highly encouraged in the game. In addition, there is something called the inactivity penalty. If a player is detected to be AFK, then they will not receive any rewards for that session. This is a game meant to be played, after all. I probably don't need to tell you that the co-op experience in DNA still has ways to go. The late game grind mostly revolves around AFKing in a mission. Some players just leech off your hard work, and some commissions are actually faster if you do it solo, given that most missions don't last 2 minutes. Being a game that stands out from traditional gachas, which supposedly encourages multiplayer content with its open world hub area and squad-based synergies, it sure got a lot of ways to go to match the atmosphere of co-op play from its predecessor. Now this is a golden comparison. Let's talk about character builds and player expression. In Warframe, the central way you can upgrade and modify your frames and weapons is through modding. Here's how it works. There is a 2x4 grid in which you can slot mods into that give, modifications to the thing you're upgrading. There is a modding capacity where you cannot exceed it, and as you upgrade your mods and they grant more powerful abilities, it will naturally take up more. There is a stance mod for melee weapons where they will change its moveset while also increasing your capacity. There is also the polarity mechanic, where when you equip a mod that matches the polarity, the mod capacity it takes up gets halved. Non-matching polarity will increase the capacity it takes up instead. The max mastery rank for equipment is 30, but you will gain more mod capacity as you master it. You can also spend an item called Forma that will let you build a polarity on a slot while resetting the weapon mastery back to 0. Well, they say that a picture is worth 1,000 words, so here you go. It's pretty damning how similar it is. The same 2x4 grid, an extra mod slot for a passive that also gives Demon Wedge tolerance, the slot adapter that lets you change the polarity of a slot to cut down on its tolerance cost. You get the idea. To its credit, I do want to point out that you do have to spend this thing called the Orokin Catalyst to double the mod capacity in Warframe, where you just get the max capacity in DNA. So that is one barrier it removed. However, this is where the differences start to arise. Warframe's weapons mostly don't contain their own elements, but rather you can install mods that will infuse that weapon in the element you want. This is in addition to physical damage types of impact, puncture, and slash, often abbreviated as IPS. There's 4 elements in the game, and when you combine 2 together, you get a compound element that does something else. The game is also diverse with enemy factions, all with their exclusive strengths and weaknesses. Take the Corpus faction, for example. Most of the targets will have shields, whereas a lot of the other factions don't. They are weak towards slash damage as well as magnetic. However, you can also build a weapon for toxin damage, as it just ignores shields and goes straight for a target's health. Because these elemental effects are on mods, you have the freedom to let your weapon deal whatever damage you want. That's not including external ways to buff up your kit, like arcanes where they will provide passive boosts when you do something, Archon shards that give further passive abilities, helmet segments that let you subsume an ability from a warframe and put it on another, focus school upgrades where you swap between your warframe and operator, incarnates that are augments of existing weapons that unlock special abilities exclusive to them. I haven't even thoroughly explored the world of corrupted mods, which give boosts beyond the usual mod limit, but also giving you a negative effect. Riven mods that grant powerful randomized abilities. Weapons that are deemed used less often by the player base will make the Riven mod effects more pronounced, effectively encouraging you to run these weapons more. Like I said, 100 to 200 hours is not enough time to do the modding system justice, but Warframe's customization is truly on another level. It's one of the most complex but varied gearing mechanics I've seen in any video game. Weapons look, play, and feel different depending on your mod choice. There is an incredible amount of build variety and player expression. Based on all these similarities so far, let's establish some facts. Duet Night Abyss, mechanically speaking, is not a gacha game. It's a looter-based action brawler that borrows a lot of influence from Warframe. Therefore, it doesn't make too much sense to compare it to gacha games. Instead, it does make sense to compare it to the thing that it copied its template from. As you can see, Duet Night Abyss is very clearly rehashing Warframe's modding system, but ever since I dismissed the gameplay as shallow last time, I now know exactly why. This is because Duet Night Abyss does not fully understand the complexities of Warframe's modding system. They either didn't have the resources or the skills to replicate it to the same level of depth. That's why the majority of demon wedges feel like your typical artifact pieces in a gacha game. The fact that characters are glued to their own individual element can also restrict certain factors. Wedges don't change the overall feel and the gameplay of the weapon to anywhere close to the same extent as Warframe. The same can be said with weapon diversity. Because how there's no secondary weapon slot and how the movement feels neutered compared to the thing it's copying from, it also hurts player expression. Well, Warframe had it, so we should have it too. I feel like the game is still far too stuck in its gacha roots, as the demon wedges mainly give stat upgrades for the element you want. The elemental system is also quite simplified, how attacking with a strong element increases your damage by 400%, and how a weak element deals only 50% damage. Only the Lumino and Umbro elements do things that are not just DOT effects. To be on the fair side, certain niche effects do exist in DNA. It's just that they're not being explored enough at the moment. For example, the weapons in the game actually deal different physical damage types, like Spike that deals more damage to health, Smash that multiplies the damage done to stance by 2 times, and Slash that deals more damage to shields. My main issue with Duet Night Abyss last time was that I thought the gameplay was just kind of boring. Still do, actually. But at the time, I thought that changing the progression model to a single player's would solve the problem. However, Warframe proved me wrong. As a live service, you need a constant stream of players playing the game to fund its continual development. There has to be something you can work towards and feel satisfied enough doing it. As such, you'll need a retention and monetization model to support that. So what is it about Warframe's progression system work, but less so over here? There's no stamina system in Warframe. You can play it for as much as you want. You don't level your equipment by spending upgrade materials, you literally just play the game and they will be naturally leveled. Other crafting materials and mods will drop when running the stages too. And different planets and enemies can have different drops. How you craft the majority of equipment is through the foundry. You'll need a blueprint and at times, individual parts. You'll spend the common credit currency to craft it with a wait time. This can vary from 12 to 24 hours for weapons. For warframes, each part will take 12 hours to craft, and the full frame will require a whopping 72 hours or 3 real-life days. You can, of course, speed it up by spending the premium platinum currency. More on this later, though. Your main journey as a new player is simply beating every level in the star chart once to unlock the late game mode, but some timed events will still offer exclusive rewards. A popular one is Void Fissures, where you can get blueprints and parts to craft prime versions of frames and weapons, which basically are just ones with slightly stronger variants. You'll get these Void Relics from just completing the missions, and the prize pool is split into 3 rarity tiers, 3 in bronze, 2 in silver, 1 in gold. You go to the tab in the navigation menu to see what Void Fissure missions are available. These will cycle periodically, so you won't get the same ones every time. Looking a little familiar, I imagine. Maybe too familiar. Anyways, you run the mission as usual, but you will have to defeat enough enemies to collect their fissures so that the relic can be opened when you complete it. One prize will be given to you at random from the pool. However, if you run a lobby of more players, then their prize options will also appear, so everyone will actually have more options to choose from. In addition, if another player chooses your reward, you get a little bit extra of this void currency. This can be used to upgrade a relic so that the rarer prizes have a higher chance of dropping, and also used in a few recipes. As you can see, this is exactly what DNA ported over as its own character and weapon system. The secret letter mechanic for characters is a slight variation of it. Although, to DNA's credit, there is an argument to be made that its grind is just more casual friendly since missions barely take up any time. And new characters don't need you to wait half a week to unlock. The Void Fissures do have their own types that you have to run their specific missions for. Well, a counter-argument is that there's no dupe system in Warframe, so one copy is all you need. Some helpful upgrades are locked behind Intron levels, after all. Since Warframe has been in the market for 10 plus years, there is also an insane amount of content to do. From standings with various factions that you can do bounties for, to the weekly circuit co-op roguelike mode where you're actually given a Warframe blueprint and all of its parts of your choosing, making it an insane amount of value for beginners to cut down on the grind. There's Railjack missions where you commandeer a giant ship and engage in combat in space with another faction. There's arena modes, arbitrations, Archon hunts, this weekly mission where you play as this funny mercenary guy Cole. All of these modes provide their exclusive rewards and mods, ones that you can't get anywhere else. I believe one of the main reasons that the game maintains its popularity throughout all these years is because the main gameplay framework is incredibly solid. As a video game, it's immensely satisfying to play. They're able to branch out and iterate on the framework to make other game modes. If we consider that this is what DNA is trying to replicate, at its current version, the game feels lacking. The problem right now is that as a former gacha that removed its gacha at the last minute, it's currently stuck in a limbo state where it doesn't know if it's a gacha-like or a Warframe-like. In my opinion, if they were to be attempting to be like Warframe, then they probably still have years of work left to go. The movement is janky, the build variety is restrictive, it lacks variation in game modes, co-op play is non-existent, and the coolest cosmetics are locked behind an expensive gacha. If you wanted to fill the shoes of Warframe, then you would have to deliver something that's of equal value or better, and Warframe's shoes are pretty gigantic. And you might be arguing, well, DNA is just out of the oven, you can't compare it to a giant that's been live for more than 12 years. And you're right. It might become better in the next couple months or years. It might actually live up to the expectations of anime Warframe. But here's my question to you. As a consumer that has no ties to the development history and background knowledge of certain game companies, I will simply gravitate towards whichever game is more fun and worth my time. Why would I invest my own time and resources into a game that might become good sometime in the future when I can play the version that already delivers this exact gameplay in a better capacity right now? more fluid movement and gunplay, an iceberg level of customization with character builds and weapons, systems that encourage co-op play and interactions with the community, and a more diverse and free-to-play model with its cosmetics. Do I think Warframe is a perfect game? No. I just recently learned that there was an update to the star chart system in late 2025, and the new teacher quest that's basically a short tutorial on mods. Except, I still had to get one of my buddies to explain certain mechanics to me, and I had to dig through a bunch of online guides to know what I'm supposed to be doing. The 3-day wait for crafting new frames does seem like an arbitrarily long amount of time. There's also some parasitic designs, like modes that don't synergize well with the core gameplay loop and are just kinda on the side while adding little to nothing to the main experience other than just neat little side activities. I also didn't really like the railjack missions, and it seems a lot of other people don't either. There's so much stuff in the game these days that you might have to have a wiki page open on your second monitor. It's also kinda ridiculous that the full extent of the game's upgrade system requires an obscene amount of time to get a hold of. Telling someone that they don't have the credentials to critique how upgrades work in a video game after 100 hours of playtime is kinda absurd if you think about it, yet it's just the unique position that the game finds itself in. You'll probably find people trying to discredit me with this very argument in the comments. There's a good video I go back to every now and then by Josh Drive Hayes on It Gets Better After 100 Hours. In the video, he used Warframe for its thumbnail and video content, and over these years, I never quite understood why. But now, I see. There is an argument that can be said where the full extent of the game should be available to everyone within a reasonable amount of playtime. Telling someone that their opinion on a game is only valid after 100 to 200 hours is a little weird. So let me be clear. I'm not critiquing Warframe's build mechanics. I'm simply pointing out that the game has way more layers of complexity to its upgrades than DNA. Some people might like the auto-battle AFK nature of farming in the game right now. If DNA stayed as a gacha game, I think I would have been fine with it too. Look, there's plenty of auto-battler gacha games, so I can understand that to a certain extent. However, DNA is not a gacha, it's a looter-based action brawler, and people will be comparing it to other looter-based action brawlers, like Borderlands, The First Descendant, and Warframe. And I'm pretty sure all of those games offer a lot more than just going AFK. Look at the promotional material for the game. Where in these trailers is a hint that the game is an auto-battler? It screams action, dynamic weapon switching, high-intensity movement. DNA did not turn into an AFK idle game because it was the intended vision. It became like this because it's a byproduct of a core gameplay framework that wasn't as well thought out as I would have liked. I have no problems with people enjoying the game as an idle game. I just want people to know that as a looter-based game, it's absolutely appropriate to compare to other titles in the same genre. Duet Night Abyss effectively gacha-fied a lot of the progression systems. You got the upgrade materials upon completing the commission instead of earning it innately. The demon wedges are also considered another major upgrade as they also have blueprints that you have to craft, making some of them objective improvements versus if you didn't have them. I haven't even talked about how certain character designs are eerily similar to ones from Warframe, how the character trial system ranked up the same way as it does in Warframe, how character kits are simplified from only having 2 skills instead of Warframe's 4. At this point in time, the game also sells you some convenient shortcut packs in the cash shop to skip some of the grind. Now, astute observers will argue that Warframe also allows you to spend platinum to skip grind as well as boosters for doubling drop rates. So if I were to be criticizing DNA, then I also gotta criticize Warframe for using the same tactics. Wow, this is where things get interesting. In Warframe, you can get platinum for free. This is where we'll move into possibly the most important comparison of all, monetization. This is the second component for Warframe's success, and the secret to making its entire economy run. Their unique approach to monetization is what keeps the community active while earning enough to continue development for the game. In the marketplace, you can buy all sorts of Warframes, weapons, cosmetics, boosters, and bundle deals for platinum, which is the in-game premium currency. If you buy anything here, it's just delivered straight to your inventory. You wouldn't have to farm the parts or wait for them to be completed crafting. However, a lot of people would consider grinding for the stuff you want to be more enjoyable, since the core gameplay is already fun and you can always farm byproducts when you actually engage with the game and its community. While there are cosmetic items that will rotate periodically in stock or not, and once in Tennogen what you do have to pay money for, anything gameplay related or involving story relevance will be permanently available. This ties into the player trading mechanic, which leans more into the MMO side, and one that DNA does not do at all. I'll talk about the consequences of this a bit later. Two players can trade a great deal of things in the game, such as blueprints, mods, arcanes, certain materials, and so on. The most common type of trades is with platinum. If you have something desirable that other players want, you can earn yourself a steady supply of plat for free. There is a variety of items that are highly sought after, such as mods that can only drop from a specific mission, and some players will be willing to pay a little to skip grinding for it themselves. In other words, you can profit a lot from doing the legwork that someone else doesn't want to do. Generally, the more tedious the farm, the more platinum you make. For example, I wanted these mods that only have a small percentage chance to drop from this specific spy mission. After an hour or so, I was able to get 2 of them, but the last one just happened to elude me. So, what I did was that I simply sold off my 2 extra rhyme rounds for 30 plat each, then used the profit I made to get the last one I wanted from another player. Another strategy is profiting off supply and demand. Remember the Void Relics? Well, they have many different variants that drop different rewards, and these actually rotate periodically. Take the set for Zaku Prime, for example. You can have the blueprint and its parts drop from the relic at this time, but it might not be in the future, which is referred to as being vaulted. If you had the patience, you would simply get the set, wait until the parts are vaulted, so that there's no way for any players to get the relics that drop these parts anymore. As you might expect, this means that if you still have the vaulted set, you can get away with charging a premium of plat for it. It's not fear of missing out, since you can argue that you can still get the frame at any time, just that you have to pay extra because of the scarcity. Digital Extremes isn't the one listing these prices, it's just the player economy reacting to supply and demand. There's also a lucrative market revolving around Riven mods, where the pricing can get a little speculative, but I won't get too much into this. Alternatively, these parts can be converted to a currency called ducats, where you can trade it with this NPC called Barokatir that appears every 2 weeks to buy primed mods, which are basically the high-end mods that almost every build wants. As you can see, even if you don't directly get the thing you want from a farm, you can still put the things you did get to use in some way. It never feels like your time grinding this game was wasted. But what happens if you're a late game player and you already have everything you need in terms of gear or upgrades? Well, this turns the game into the unofficial endgame of Warframe that a lot of people refer to as Fashion Frame. There is an insane amount of customization you can do with cosmetics, individual sets for each warframe, color palettes for weapons, and ways to change the operator's facial features. As the game is actually fairly casual and there's no true endgame modes, a veteran can simply continue to find meaning in the grind by selling off their high-end loot and buying themselves some sweet cosmetics. Of course, if you do have a bit of disposable income, you could directly buy platinum with real money, which in turn would support the developers. I actually spent around $30 on the game, since they have flash sales at times, where the platinum bundles can be discounted for up to 75% off. And now that I've seen this model's true potential, I honestly just really want to support this model of game design and see it continue to succeed. Introducing player trading was a risky bet, but it did pay off for Warframe. The thing is that even if you ignore this watered-down gameplay, the grinding experience in DNA is just not as engaging. Say you got extremely unlucky with farming a weapon, where the blueprint doesn't drop, but the parts did in the dozens. If you maxed out the weapon, then you have no effective use for the parts anywhere. They will just sit in your inventory doing nothing. In Warframe, you can sell off the stuff you got access of for platinum, which is a universally useful currency that you can spend on something you do want, making the grind experience better. Even if they don't want to risk putting player trading in, they can at least let you melt down your excess parts or demon wedges to a currency you can use. You can turn your weapon parts into gold, except it's such a pitiful amount that you might as well wait and see if they do an update with this, since basically anything is better value. The demon wedges can be turned into its leveling material, except there's a daily cap, with no other ways to fuse the wedges into a set you want instead. The character shards? Yeah, those are bricked. If you max out a character, you would have no use for it and it's stuck in your inventory. A couple years back, the looter shooter The First Descendant launched into a fairly mixed reception. The popular sentiment at the time was that it borrowed a lot of elements from Warframe, but made them more stingy and predatory, just with more, gooner elements. A lot of people made similar critiques, but this excerpt from the channel Upper Echelon really captures my thoughts after comparing DNA's grinding experience from the thing it's copying from.
If you spend time farming for something, and you don't get the item that you wanted, that's normal. Happens in pretty much every single loot-based game. If it's almost a complete waste, but at least you get some components or something, that's also normal. However, if you spend your time farming for something and get literally nothing A flat 0. Nothing you can use, nothing you can sell, something that takes up inventory space with no other purpose or value and you can't get rid of it. That is infuriating, and it makes you want to quit the game. It's the epitome of wasting your time.
But hey, no stamina system, so it has to be a better game. Am I right, guys? Here's how I would describe Warframe's main business model, with all three components linked to one another in some way. You first entice new players with a fantastic framework for a gameplay loop, with ways to iterate off of and ways to express your own skills and personality. The second component is having a good amount of meaningful content that can be played in a loop and grind without being repetitive. Finally, a player trading system to encourage all types of players to make trades and drive up the sense of community, letting you work towards whatever goal you set for yourself, earning a profit from those that buy plat with real money, and thus the loop repeats. As you can see, it is a highly intricate economy that the game came up with. And the reason why the game makes enough to stay profitable is because of the other two steps in the chart. The trading volume can only be high when there's a lot of players engaging with the game. It's a positive feedback cycle that's incredibly hard to balance, but Warframe somehow managed to make it work. This is why the game maintains a high player retention rate, and why it doesn't need a stamina system, gacha mechanics, or anything resembling fear of missing out. I imagine that as the game that advertised the whole no stamina, no gacha gimmick, this was the ideal situation to happen with DNA as well. But I would personally immediately slash all of those components in the loop. Despite me restating the same thing as I did in my first review, I believe more people will be inclined to agree with me this time. As an action brawler, the gameplay for Duet Night Abyss is just not very fun. A small subset of the roster vastly outshines the other options, and the Demon Wedge upgrades feel rather one-dimensional. It frankly pales in comparisons with Warframe's build variety, despite trying to use its modding framework. Here's the thing about gacha games I've noticed. The core gameplay loop for them, most of the time, is not engaging enough to single-handedly carry the experience. It has to rely on tactics like stamina, thrills of gambling behavior through the gacha, and FOMO events and rewards to retain you as a player. After all, gambling can be pretty fun. These practices work for a reason. I think it's understandable that when the game announced it was removing these practices, in the spur of the moment, a lot of people were immediately on board with what they were doing. Duet Night Abyss promised an experience that gives you the freedom to play it like a casual mobile title where you just log in for 5 minutes to do the dailies, or one where you can spend your time grinding at your own pace and play it however you want. With no gameplay elements locked behind fear of missing out, and where the spenders can spend money on the cosmetics to fund the game for everyone else. Despite everything I've said so far, copying many elements from Warframe, it can still be considered a new idea in the gacha space. In a vacuum, this is how it should have worked. At its current state, it's not so simple. Right now, Duet Night Abyss has a rough matchup against either of the markets it's supposedly targeting. If you want this specific gameplay loop of having an addictive grind, being able to play whenever and however you want with no FOMO elements, then this becomes a shoddy recreation of an expansive and hugely successful model with anime aesthetics. Calling the current state of DNA anime Warframe is frankly an insult to Warframe. It stands no chance competing on a mechanical level. On the other hand, because the gacha and stamina were removed at the last minute, it now has to use the framework it had when it was a gacha game, and their mentality with how to approach monetization has been affected by it too. The limited skin banner runs just as if it was a gacha game. Here's the problem though. The asking price for these are way too expensive for a non-paying player. Yeah, these skins are good, but not $100 good. Not to mention, there's only one of them present at a time. You can't expect this to be the game's breadwinner for 2 months in between updates. The game is too coded in its gacha origins that the monetization model is just not enticing enough. It's made it strangely too difficult for players to give the developers money, because there are just too few things of value they can buy. Predatory practices in video games will exist in varying degrees, except if the gameplay is fun, people will put up with it. Take Chaos Zero Nightmare for example. I've been playing this every day and haven't stopped buying the monthly $5 sub. This deck builder roguelike gimmick has so much potential for being expanded upon. Yes, it's a gacha game that reinforces gambling behavior for its monetization. One bit of nuance. The core gameplay loop is extremely fun. They can simply take this central concept, expand it, and improve on it over time. The game is not perfect by any means, but they nailed the core component. And I hope it gets even more successful. I think this game really has something unique to offer, and it seems a lot of other people agree based on the overwhelming popularity and financial success as a title with no major backing. Meanwhile, Warframe doesn't need to pull any tricks with time-gated farming, FOMO events and items, or a gacha system of any sort. Its core framework for gameplay, progression, and cosmetics are so well done that people simply play it because the game itself is a blast. In the land of popular gaming, gameplay is king. I would just like to state that I was originally skeptical of DNA's model because I did not believe that just by removing the character gacha and stamina, it would automatically absolve the game of all sins. If the whole promise of no stamina made the farms extremely tedious and uninteractive, where they conveniently sold the shortcut in the cash shop, then the original intention of removing stamina to respect the player's time gets thrown out the window. The boosters in DNA only apply to one run at a time, where in Warframe you get a booster that doubles the rate over 3 days, a week, or a month. Now you really can play as much as you like during that time. So it's actually more expensive to grind in DNA. It's not really a question of gachas versus non-gachas, but a question of good game design versus ones that are not so good. Look, there's no such thing as a perfect free-to-play game. You seriously can't expect developers to just hand out all portions of the game for free with no strings attached. It has to recuperate the costs somehow, and even if there's no stamina system, you still have to put some kind of time gate in the game. If you wanted to monetize through other means aside from gacha, like primarily through cosmetics, then you'd still have to create a solid gameplay loop to keep people playing and spending on your cosmetics. One very good modern example of this is Where Winds Meet. As a free-to-play open-world game with a model selling mostly cosmetics, according to Sensor Tower, it's actually competing with the top few of the current gacha games in terms of revenue. These two games are living proof that if you have a solid and engaging gameplay concept, you don't need to have gacha to succeed as a free-to-play game. Duet Night Abyss is trying to wear the skin of Warframe without matching its intricate designs on the inside. This play-to-grind system with an addictive gameplay loop has existed since 2013, and what DNA effectively did was let gacha players have a taste of it 12 years later. Being in the unique position of a former gacha, it made you draw comparisons to traditional gacha and stamina mechanics so that it appeared better in comparison to the other competition in the market. Except in reality, another game had already made this into a thing over a decade ago. So, what might be a fix for DNA at its current state? Well, I see two ways. First, they could make their own mechanics and maybe branch out from Warframe, maybe with a slightly different economy, upgrades, new commission types, or a rework to the Demon Wedge system. However, branching into unknown territory will undoubtedly require extensive playtesting and time investment. So, if they want a faster way to shake up the game and keep things interesting, I propose another solution. And I really want to say this in the most neutral, positive way possible. Just copy the rest of Warframe. I mean, the game's existing systems are so deeply entrenched in Warframes that you might as well go all the way. The winning formula is right in front of you. You just have to follow it more thoroughly. Maybe there's demon wedges that fuse with an existing element and changes it to another, like how Pyro and Electro mix to shoot out a toxic cloud that provides a DOT effect for enemies caught up in it. Maybe Hydro and Anemo creates a puddle that slows down enemy advances. I mean, yeah, that's literally how it works in Warframe, but it would make this combat system more interactive. You don't necessarily need to match Warframe in every aspect, but it should have just as much gameplay complexity. The game is not a gacha anymore, so people will be expecting the quality of a game that isn't one. In the meantime, while the game figures out what it wants to be, an immediate way for the game to drive up revenue while they work on these things would be to simply sell more cosmetics. There's no in-game trade economy, and the most premium cosmetics are just too out of reach for the average player. Why not stick to the original plan and remove the gacha entirely? Don't use a gacha monetization model for the skins. Sell the most premium costumes for like 30 to 40 bucks. I'm sure that would seem a lot more reasonable than the current rates right now. More importantly, make a lot more cosmetic items, like earrings, makeup palettes, tattoos. Since the game doesn't revolve around you playing these faceless exoskeletons, this actually gives DNA a unique advantage. Put more eggs in this cosmetics basket until the devs figure out what to do with the game. It'll keep the existing players happy for now. And look, I'm just entertaining this as an option, but the game can also go the Snowbreak route. Release some fan servicey, raunchy skins, put in some intimate dorm interactions, sell them at a high price, and make them seasonally time limited. I'm sure people would buy those too. Hey look, as someone that doesn't care in the slightest how goon heavy a game is, if the game goes down this road, I would not be against that. Let me be clear about something though. Just because the game isn't for me doesn't mean that it isn't for you. After all I've said, yes, it is a Warframe copycat. Its ideas are not innovative. Its systems feel shallow compared to the source material. But maybe you just want the familiarity of Warframe with anime graphics. They didn't patent these ideas after all. Maybe you have no issues with a simple hack and slash gameplay. In a world where Warframe doesn't exist, or you just don't care that it exists, then DNA can still be considered a good game. The story is great. The overall quality is great. The music is fantastic, actually. You can still get lost in the game's narratives and world. The farming system is casual, and you'll still score a decent amount of free characters and weapons in relatively little time. Hard to critique that when you're getting all of this for free. I'm not here to invalidate your fun and say that you're a bad person for playing it. I have no problems with people enjoying the game for what it is. I myself actually had a lot of fun with it during its closed beta test. I mean, the visuals alone look extremely impressive. Personally, the devs don't come off as greedy, and I'm sure the vision they had in their mind would elevate DNA from your typical gacha game. It's just a case of good intention, bad execution. Part of me believes that the game can still turn this around. Now that I've had a taste of Warframe, if they're able to match the same level of depth but put their own unique twist on it, I'd probably come back and play this. I will repeat what I said in the conclusion of my first DNA review. And even though it might not be for me, I can see how the game can have an addictive grind for the right players. And this is a game I overall would have no problems recommending to others to try. If you ask me, at its current state, DNA is a decent 7 out of 10 ACG-style action brawler with a grind-focused progression system and skin gacha monetization. If the game recovers, balances the weapons and characters a little, and manages to match Warframe mechanically while having its own spin on the formula, I think it can still have a place in the market. I have no problems with people enjoying the game as just that. It's still a free game with some solid atmosphere. Stick around for the new story and world building when they drop more of it. Go ahead and try it out at least. However, what I do have a problem with is when people oversell this game as something that it's not. The announcement for removing the character gacha and stamina was a brilliant marketing scheme. It implicated itself as a revolutionary title in the gacha space, the first of its kind, and a shining example for others to follow that will get rid of the genre's predatory practices. When in reality, it's directly copying from another game that came up with a formula, who did take the creative risk of inventing something new, and is still massively successful 12 years after its initial launch. Let this be a prime example in the history of gacha gaming that just because a game announces that it's removing its gacha and stamina systems, you shouldn't automatically see it as a better game. You have to acknowledge its potentials, but also critique it equally. I'm looking at you, Ananta. In the event that DNA rebounds and takes off again, I don't believe its success was due to the innovation to remove the character gacha and stamina systems. If anything, I think it proves that if you take an existing concept that's proven to work outside the gacha space, then you too can succeed without too much creative risk on your part. In the event that DNA does not recover, and in the worst case shuts down, I believe it has nothing to do with gacha mechanics having too much influence in the space. Oh, this game dared to try defy gacha tactics and failed. What a shame. I guess this is just the grim reality we live in. Gacha is just too prevalent. When in reality, it's simply a case of misunderstanding the source it's copying its homework from, resulting in a subpar gameplay experience. For a bit of positivity, I do want to say that there are good commentaries on this whole ordeal with DNA. Particularly, I liked Sunol's analysis on this topic, and is one of the few people in the gacha niche that provides nuanced discussions on things happening within the space. He's a great gacha content creator all around if you ask me. To conclude this video, addressing the current state of Duet Night Abyss from 1.0 to 1.1, I would like to restate portions of what I said in the conclusion of my original review, word for word. I don't think Duet Night Abyss will be reaching the upper echelon of gacha gaming revenues, and I predict not a lot of games will follow suit what it's doing. The decision to remove the character gacha and stamina will be fairly minimal in the grand scheme of things, and I predict Duet Night Abyss will not kill gacha games or reform them to a great extent. This has been Psyche with my updated thoughts on Duet Night Abyss. Thank you for watching. I'm out.